What's going on, everybody? This is Chris from AppSumo, and you are joining the AppSumo Remote Work Academy. And I am super excited because today we have Taylor Schulte. If you guys don't know Taylor, you should. I've been listening to his podcast for probably about 9 months right now, and it is my favorite personal finance podcast. You get a ton out of it. So it is Taylor, it's the Stay Wealthy podcast. Yeah.
That's correct.
Stay Wealthy. You can get it on Spotify, iTunes. What do they call it? What is the iTunes podcast? Is it just Apple Podcasts?
I think it's called Apple Podcasts now. Yep.
Apple Podcast. Awesome. All right. Well, let me give you all, as you're coming in, first of all, let us know where you're tuning in from. Are you guys in the US? Are you international? What city are you guys in? Let us know, and let us know what line of business you're in. Are you guys running a SaaS company, e-commerce, brick and mortar? And I would also love to know, where would you guys rate yourself on your knowledge of personal finance? Do you guys think that you feel pretty secure, pretty confident in what you're doing? Do you feel like things are way out of whack? Is it just something you've never really thought about before, and now you're seeing a lot of things in the news and you're thinking, hey, how should I be framing this in my mind? I am in Austin, Texas. Taylor is in sunny San Diego. All right, we got Dallas, Fort Worth. Yeah, let us know where you kind of put yourselves on that 1 to 10 scale. 1 being, I know nothing about personal finance and I want to get some of the basics so I can do this right. And 10 being, I'm an expert. I don't need you guys. I'm here to teach you guys a lesson. So let us know. I see some 2s coming in. Cool. Well, let me give you guys. Oh, we got an 8. Awesome. A 5 out of 10. Okay. Cool. Man, I put myself at a 6 for most things. So we'll put myself at a 6. Taylor, where do you think you are?
Look, I'm a finance nerd at heart. So,
we're going to give you that 9.9.
I was just going to say, I'm not going to give myself a 10. I'll give myself a 9.9.
Got to leave room for the black swan. But yeah. Awesome. Well, let me tell you guys, if you don't know Taylor, you should. But Taylor Schulte is a certified financial planner and founder of Define Financial, a commission-free wealth management firm headquartered in San Diego, California. He is passionate about helping his clients reduce taxes, invest smarter, and make work optional in retirement. That sounds great. Taylor has been recognized by Investopedia as one of the top 100 most influential advisors, and his commentary is regularly featured in a number of publications such as the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Forbes, Bloomberg, and Business Insider. And he is also the host, as I mentioned, of the Stay Wealthy podcast and iTunes Top 200 Investing Show. Taylor, I am stoked to have you here. Thank you so much for working with us to make this happen.
Yeah, Chris, thanks so much for having me. In anticipation of this, I know you guys are out in Austin, so I made myself a breakfast taco this morning. I want you to know that.
Oh, that is awesome and much appreciated. Yeah, I don't think I have ever had or thought I could consume as many tacos as I have since I moved to Austin about 5 years ago. Me and my girlfriend will constantly talk about how there's just about nothing else you can have for breakfast in Austin other than a breakfast taco. So that's great. I'm glad you're enjoying a little taste of Texas. But as we dive in today, I think a lot of people have a lot of concerns about what's going on, understandably, with the economy and with the financial markets. But I think before we go into like the initial volatility and everything that's going on, I think it would be super helpful to kind of just start with some of the basics of personal finance, the things that you should be thinking about well before you look at like the rise and fall of the S&P 500 right now. So where would you kind of like initially guide someone? Say there, as we saw, people are coming in maybe a 1, 2, or 3. How do you want to set the stage for them?
Yeah. And I want to preface this by like, this is the boring stuff. This is stuff that nobody wants to talk about. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't get clicks, but it really, really is important to nail this stuff down before we start talking about, different investment strategies and how to save taxes and, really getting fancy with it. I find that a lot of us in any industry, in any project, in any business, like we always love to jump to the fun stuff first. We don't really want to do the hard work, but the hard work is so important. So I've just had like 5 kind of rules of thumb, like 5 things that you should do before you start to get into the weeds with any of this stuff. And again, it might sound boring and repetitive, but I'm just going to say it because it's so important. Number one is before you do anything at all, you have to have a rainy day fund or an emergency savings account. Before you do anything, before you think about taking advantage of this down market and putting money in stocks, you have to have a rainy day fund. So, the rule of thumb, 3 to 6 months. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're taking risk in other places in your life, it might look like 9 or 12 months of cash reserves. So put that into place. My favorite tip there is to put it at a bank somewhere else that you don't regularly bank at. So it's out of sight, out of mind. You're not tempted to borrow from it to buy that plane ticket or, a new microphone for a podcast. Out of sight, out of mind, high yield savings account. Personally, I use Ally Bank, ALLY, but there's a ton of them out there. Number two is to pay off debt. Paying off debt means a guaranteed investment return. So pay off that debt if you've got student loan debt. Now interest rates come into play here, right? If it's a really low interest rate and your money's better off used in other places, that's something you're going to have to figure out on your own. But paying off debt is always a great investment. Number three is to max out all of those tax advantaged accounts. So everyone has different, roles. You might own your own business, but 401ks, SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, max those things out. Non-deductible IRAs. There's something called the backdoor Roth IRA. All this stuff you can Google. The magical unicorn in this space, if you do work for a larger company, is the HSA, the health savings account. One thing on the HSA, don't spend this money. Put the money in the HSA, invest it, and let it grow for the next 20, 30, 40 years, and then spend it after it's compounded. So don't spend that money year over year. Number four is you have to have a plan. You have to have a financial plan. As boring as it sounds, you have to have one. Not having a financial plan is like a doctor prescribing you medication without seeing you or diagnosing you first. Like it's just absolutely careless to put your money in the market without a plan. If you hate plans, if you don't even know where to start, there's a great book out there called The One-Page Financial Plan. It's by Carl Richards. Go buy it, or hire a professional to help you. And then number five, every single one of our clients that is financially, they're all financially successful, but the most financially successful people know where every penny goes. So number five is to track your expenses. And this is different than a budget. I hate budgets. I don't want to be on a budget, but tracking your expenses and knowing where every penny goes is so important, because then you can make decisions and ask yourself, do I really want to be spending $200 a month on CrossFit? Knowledge is power. So just track your expenses and know where your money is going. You don't have to put yourself on a budget. So there's like the 5 big things I would tackle before getting into anything else.
Awesome. So now I'm at a loss for words because I have a million questions to ask about all of these before we move on. The first one being, so you're telling me these are all more important and you should focus on these before anything else, regardless of what's going on in the market or in your life or anything like that?
I think so. And again, some of these things include putting money in the market, right? 401ks, simple, like you put money into a tax advantage account and then you have to invest it. So investing in the market is certainly part of that. But again, it just seems silly to me you wouldn't go start taking a bunch of prescription drugs without talking to a doctor and going through a process first. So you have to nail down the basics. Now you might have a different philosophy. That's totally fine. But kind of financial planning 101, those would be the textbook things to focus on out of the gates. Yeah,
no, I think that's great. And I want to kind of pick into a couple, potentially all of these to get some real good details on it. So when we talk about the rainy day fund, what exactly, when you're calculating what those 3 to 6 months of expenses are, what are you taking into account? Because one of the things that I've noticed for myself is when I'm kind of tracking what my spending is, I know what it typically is on a month-to-month basis, but then there's those always say like you got to pay your quarterly taxes or there's a car repair or whatever it is. So how would you say somebody take into account what that actual number should be? What goes into that 3 to 6 months? How do you find the number?
Yeah, these are just like your basic living expenses. Just think, if things got really ugly, if I lost my job, if both of us lost our jobs, how much would I need to survive and to live, to eat, to pay my rent, pay my mortgage, just the very basics. So I'd call those your living expenses. Add those up, figure out what that is, and then multiply that by 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever target number that is. So this would not include things like, your gym membership or, playing golf 3 times a week or, eating out. So you're going to have to cut some corners if things get ugly. But what is that kind of bare minimum that you need to live off of month over month?
Yeah. And I think like this, yeah, I love that this is the very first thing that you say, because this is the safety net that protects you from everything going wrong. And so everything else that, people read or think about in terms of investing, it's like, yeah, but if you run into a hard patch, or if you lose your job, or if an unexpense comes up, I imagine you know the stat better than me, but what is it? It's something like 40% of Americans couldn't handle an unexpected $400 bill. It's like, this is what this is designed to address. That problem right there, where you're not then squeezed and taking on credit card debt in the future because you can't cover your expenses or cover, your rent and things like that. And I think it's like, this is your life jacket in case things go wrong. And I think that's a really important place to start.
Yeah, it allows all the other awesome things that you're doing in your life, whether, again, you own a business, you're an entrepreneur, or you have money invested in traditional places like the stock market. It allows those awesome things to continue going while we go through this difficult time. So you can tap into your emergency fund, let those awesome things keep going in the background, kind of move on with your life. If you don't have this in place, you might have to lay off employees. You might have to sell your business. You might have to go work for somebody else. You might have to sell stocks at a loss. So it's critical.
Well, and it goes to, what is it, the Warren Buffett quote, that rule number one to investing is don't lose money. And having this is what helps you not lose money, because you're protecting your downside with that. Awesome. Let's go on to, okay, so for the tax advantage accounts, I just had a question about the HSA. So the one that I've used is Lively. Are you familiar with Lively, or do you have recommended HSAs?
Lively has been kind of the blanket recommendation for a while now. They do a great job. I don't know a lot about it, but there's some chatter. Fidelity recently rolled out an HSA, and I've heard really good things about it. So I would maybe check out Fidelity's HSA as well, but Lively's got a good track record too.
Yeah, and they integrate with TD Ameritrade, and so you can just do the investing of your HSA directly through there, which is a pretty nifty setup that they got going on.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, going backwards, I guess the paying off debt. Do you have a preferred method or a way you recommend people take on debt? Because I know a lot of people, especially, I guess across the board, but at least in my demographic, friends that I see who have debt, it's just, you may have been careless, or you could have been moving and you just weren't really thinking about it. And then, a year or 2 or 3 later, you see, hey, I have $10,000 in credit card debt. How do I even begin to start paying this off and tackling this, so I can, because right now my net worth is negative and I want to fix that.
Sure. I guess the first thing I'd say is, debt is a tool and can be used. There's a lot of successful, entrepreneurs and leaders all around the world that leverage debt to get to where they are. One of my favorite books recently is Shoe Dog, and God, that guy was up to his ears in debt, and, look where he got. So I'm not advocating that you hold debt, but I just want to acknowledge that debt can be used as a tool. But paying off debt is really, really important. And if you're going to pay it off, the kind of traditional textbook answer, right, is to pay off the high interest debt first, right? So if you have
the snowball method, is that what that one is? Or is that, no, that's starting with the smallest amount?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the traditional is pay off the highest interest rate first. I prefer usually the other method, although, again, not really the textbook answer here, but you want to get some small wins under your belt. And so starting with those smaller balances first, maybe you have a $500 credit card that you forgot about. Pay that thing off, and then pay attention to how you feel when that thing goes to zero and it's done. It really gives you like motivation, like, okay, I want to do the next one. So then go to the next lowest balance and pay that thing off. And you get these small wins under your belt, and it can become really motivating to start to tackle all of it. When you're staring at a $12,000 credit card balance, you're like, how am I ever going to pay this off? Certainly not as motivating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I guess another question that could come up is, okay, so somebody has saved up those 3 to 6 months of expenses. Now they have a little bit left over. And I think some people will get to the question where it's like, do I keep saving, or do I invest, or do I put this towards my credit card debt and things like that? And where do you prioritize those things? And just to follow up on, I guess, man, I'm always told in interviews, never ask multiple questions in a row, but I just can't seem to help it. So I apologize. But debt can definitely be a tool. I think credit card debt is rarely a good tool to use for this. But yeah, I think that's an important distinction for folks. But yeah, in terms of, What was my original question?
Something along the
I lose
lines of
myself.
if you've got some extra money after that rainy day fund, what
Yeah.
do you do with it?
Yeah.
Invest or pay off that debt.
Hmm.
Again, this is just one of those like it depends things.
Hmm.
Again, like for most people, paying off debt is one of the best things that you can do. Again, it's a guaranteed investment return. If you're paying, 8%, even if you're paying something like 5 or 6%,
Hmm.
right? Paying that's like net of fees, net of taxes. That's a real rate of return, which is not easy to get in a short period of time. So don't think that I'm just talking about 15% and 20% here. Like paying off 5% debt, 6% debt, those are real numbers. That's a guaranteed investment return you're not going to find anywhere
Hmm.
else. So for most people, I think paying off debt should be, a big priority. Again, if you view debt as a tool and you're using it for different purposes, totally fine to start thinking about other things. So it is kind of an it depends thing, which goes towards like have a plan. Just have a plan in place. This could be part of
Yeah.
your one-page financial plan.
Yeah, and if it's done strategically and purposefully to take on debt, that's yeah, you can definitely use that as a leverage point. But I think that's another great point that you made is like, yeah, if you're even getting charged like 6% and you're investing, it's like, yeah, you're kind of hoping to make 6 or 8% on your investments. This is guaranteeing that. That's just if you have this debt, that's just sucking away from those investment returns. And then you also, like you said, you get that psychological win. If you're able to, knock off one credit card, that's done. I can move on to the next one. It's just you're building up that momentum and that confidence in your ability to become a more sophisticated person with your own money because nobody's going to care about it as much as you.
Yeah, and remember, net of fees, net of taxes, net of inflation. When we see these numbers on television, average rates of return of 10% or whatever, like that's fine. Those are indexes that we're looking at. Those are not investable, funds. So when you actually invest your money in a fund, a mutual fund, an ETF, you're paying taxes, you're paying transaction fees, you're paying expense ratios. Sometimes inflation comes into play. So we call that your real rate of return, and getting a real rate of return of 5-6% is not easy. It sometimes
Mm-hmm.
takes 20 years to get that average rate of return of
And
real
it's certainly
returns.
not consistent.
Yeah, so yeah, I think we're learning that right now.
Okay, moving on to the one-page financial plan. So we don't need to spend, I don't think, too much time on this, but are there a handful of pieces in here that you think are like the most important elements of it?
Honestly, I don't. I mean, I think the book is the best resource, and to go through that, and if you're married, go through it with your spouse. Again, it doesn't need to be overly complicated, but just going through that exercise and writing down, where do we want to be in a year? Where do we want to be in 3 years? Where do we want to be in 5 years? And start to map out a plan to get there. I think one of the most important pieces that you and I have talked about is an investment policy statement. So I'm a huge advocate of this. Even if you're a do-it-yourself investor, you should have an investment policy statement that guides your investments, and it helps really protect you from yourself. But again, a one-page piece of paper that says, my goal for investing this money is X, Y, and Z. This is the amount of risk I want to take with this bucket of money. And here's the asset allocation that I've kind of agreed to, either with my financial advisor or with myself. And you stick to that investment policy statement. So your investments don't change unless that investment policy statement changes. Now, in a perfect world, again, a financial plan should drive the investment policy statement, and the investment policy statement should drive your investments, which means your investments should never change unless your investment policy statement changes, and your investment policy statement should never change unless your financial plan changes.
Mhm.
So, go through some of those pieces. You can Google around too. There's some free articles on the one-page financial plan by Carl Richards. I think he's done some videos as well, but yeah, those are a few to
Awesome.
think about.
I love that. No, there's this one of my favorite books is a book called Willpower by Roy Baumeister, I think is his last name. And in it, he talks about what he calls the hot cold empathy gap, where say you're going to a party and you're like, you're trying to eat a specific diet, but then beforehand, you're thinking like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna eat it. But then you get there and you end up doing it. And the difference is like, you're giving into the behavior when you're in this hot environment, like it's right in front of you in order to make the decision. It's harder to resist. He says for things like this, you need to take advantage of like that cold element where you're removed, you can be more rational, you put this down. And so that's kind of the point of an investor policy statement is when you're in a cold, rational mindset, you're putting down in paper the way you're going to handle and the way you're going to make decisions. So then when you are in the heat of it and the pressure's on and things are changing, it's like, I made this when I was in my right mind. I can tell that I'm a little bit off right now. So I should be relying on my better self that I kind of solidified on paper. And I should only be changing that if I can get back to that kind of cold mentality.
Yep. Yeah. And there's just something I love that, by the way. I'm going to check out that book. There's something powerful about just writing this stuff down. It doesn't need to be a fancy computer program or app or anything like that. A piece of paper and a pen and writing this down can be really powerful. Someone mentioned my John Acuff calendar behind me. It's called the Finish 2020 calendar. He does it every year. My whole calendar is written down in pen here. It's not on an app or my computer or anything like that. My whole calendar is written down, and it's just really powerful to have that written down. And the purpose of doing that is to put our rocks there first, the things that are most important, which is spending time with our kids right now while they're young. So we put those on the calendar first, and then we put everything else. But point is, writing this stuff down is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and mine is just a Google Doc with bullet points in it. And it can start, like you're saying, it can be very simple. It could say, I am not going to invest until I have 6 months in an emergency fund. And that can be where you start. And then as you get more sophisticated, you can build it out more as you learn. In terms of know where every penny goes, do you have any specific tracking tools? I've been using Truebill recently. That's been good, as well as Personal Capital. But do you have any favorites?
The challenge with this is everybody has a different method. There's a different method that works for different people. There's not really like one thing that works for everybody. For me, for you, it might be technology. It might be something like Personal Capital or mint.com. I have friends, I have clients that a piece of paper and a pen is what works best. Like combing through all of their statements for the last 12 months and writing it down on a piece of paper. I've had clients bring it into me, like I can barely read it, but it's most important that they went through that exercise themselves and that they understand it. So you have to find a method that works for you. And when you find it, just stick with that. Don't, perfect is the enemy of good here, right? Like, don't think that you have to go learn Quicken or QuickBooks or any of that stuff. Just find something simple. And it might just be that your starting point might be a pen and a piece of paper and going through that. Your starting point might be, a lot of banks and credit cards will give you an annual summary of your spending. And most of us are afraid to look at it. So, you might print that off and start there and see, where did my money go this last year? Also, one tip, a lot of us these days spend a lot of money on Amazon. And when you look at your credit card statement, it just says Amazon. Spent $2,000 last month at Amazon. What Amazon doesn't want you to know is where that money is going. But if you dig into Amazon, into your settings, and you have to Google, look it up, whatever, you can actually download a spreadsheet in Excel format that shows all the different categories and where your money went.
That was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
How much I've spent since like 2008 on Amazon.
Yep. Yeah, they do not want to put that front and center, but I highly recommend that everybody go and do that. It's a great way to track your Amazon spending.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And I think what's really important about those 5 steps that you laid out is they are, like we said, they're impervious to what's going on in the market or economically or things like that. Like, these are things that you should be locking down regardless of what's going on before you transition into some of this other stuff that's going on, which I think we can kind of dive into now, is like, on the behavioral side, how should people be thinking about what's going on, and what are you kind of coaching your clients through? Or you were actually saying before the call, you've been coaching your clients for years, ever since I imagine they became clients, about how they should be thinking about the markets and thinking about investing.
Yeah, the behavioral side of finance, again, not really sexy at all, but it really is probably the most important piece of it all. Like, in order to be successful, you have to be in control of your behavior and your decision-making when it comes to money. Human beings, all of us, myself included, we are extremely irrational when it comes to money. Our fight or flight kicks in all the time with events like this. And it could be during good times and bad times, right? During good times, we get greedy and we're spending a lot of money and we're making crazy investments. And then during bad times, we're freaking out and we're selling things and we're cutting costs. So we're just really irrational with, our money and our investments. And that's totally normal. We can just acknowledge that. And then learn more about how we can stay in control of this. I told you I was going to share my screen really quick.
Yeah, I think this would be great.
Okay, cool. So I mentioned Carl Richards already. He is a New York Times author. He's written several books. He writes a column He's become a really good friend of mine, and he's famous for these Sharpie drawings, like these very simple drawings to bring to the surface these complex topics. And he is like the behavioral finance king. So here's what I'll
While
do.
you're getting this set up, let me plug your podcast one more time, because if nothing else, I got a free copy of this book by listening to Taylor's podcast where he was doing a promotion for this book, and all you had to do was leave a review. I left a review, and then Taylor sent me a handwritten note with a copy of this book, and I finished it last week. And it's another great reason to check out the Stay Wealthy podcast. I'm a big fan of it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, Carl is just one of my favorite people all around. So I'm just going to share 3 kind of slides with you. This is his Sharpie drawings that he's famous for. And this is what he calls the behavior gap. So investment returns, this is what I talked about when, you see on CNBC or whatever, that the average rate of return for stocks is 10% over the last, 100 years or whatever. That's the investment return. But the investor return looks very different. And we actually have data on this, and this graphic doesn't show the data, but I'm just going to pull this out of hat. It's something like over the last 100 years, the average rate of return for the US stock market is 10%, but for the investor, it looks more like 2 or 3%. And that's because investors, again, are very irrational with their money. They're buying and getting greedy at the top, and they're selling and getting fearful at the bottom. And they're not taking advantage of these long-term returns and letting their money compound because they're getting in their own way. So Morningstar also tracks investor returns versus investment returns too. When you look up a specific fund or an ETF or something, if you dig a little deeper, you can see kind of the difference between investors and investments. So this is what I was talking about. This is like his absolutely, most famous drawing, which is, getting greedy, buying when the market's here at the top. When the market drops, like we're experiencing right now, we have this like fear. We want to sell, we want to get out, we want to run. That's, fight or flight kind of kicks in. If we keep doing this, we repeat it, we're going to be broke. You're never going to win. Warren Buffett is one of the most successful investors of all time. You mentioned his rule of thumb, not losing money. Look, Warren's investments have gone down in value in the short term temporarily. He's just never sold and realized those losses. So, he's one of the most successful investors of all time because he's bought really good companies and held them for a long period of time and let that compound. There's actually a chart of Warren's wealth. By the way, he didn't become a billionaire. I know a billion is a lot of money, but he didn't become a billionaire until he was 55 years old. Wow. It took that long in order for it to happen. And if you look at the chart of his net worth, it's like boring and flat for a long time. And then compounding interest, once it starts, you have that hockey stick and it just goes. You can see this in the world of entrepreneurship and business as well. So we can't do what we're seeing here on the screen. And then lastly, just this is like my mantra every single day, no matter what, is to focus on things I can control. I can't control what the government's doing in response to the coronavirus. I can't control what the Fed's doing in regards to the stimulus package. I can understand and follow these things, but I cannot control them. So there are so many things in our financial life, in our life in general, that we can control. And I just love to stare at this and just like remind myself every single day when I get anxious. Right now is a difficult time for me. It's a difficult time for everybody, but every single day I wake up like, what can I do that's in my control today to just move the needle in the right direction? And so, 3 of my favorite slides here to kind of just like bring to the surface some of these behavioral sides of investing.
No, that's great. Could you go back to the second slide? I think what's interesting is because when you see this from a distance and you can see it from, I guess, seeing what the cycle looks like, it can be easy in hindsight where we're very good at looking in the rearview mirror and we can see, oh yeah, why would you sell at the bottom when that it came back up? But the hard part is like when you don't know right now, it's like, are we at the bottom? Are we in between that kind of greed, buy, fear, sell? You don't know where you are on the graph, but all of history has taught us that it will come back up over a certain period of time. You don't know when or how long, but when you're in the middle of that, that's when it's very, very fearful because you don't know or you can't see that next valley that's coming up or that next, I guess, peak coming up.
Yeah. And I want to say something. Timing the market is impossible. Nobody has successfully timed the market and done it consistently. There are people that have gotten lucky and then they create brands and write books and blogs because they got lucky once. But no one has consistently time the market year over year, decade over decade. It's never happened. Because here's the thing, in looking at this chart here, you have to be right twice. You have to be right. You have to know when to sell. And then you also have to know when to get back in. There's a lot of data out there. If you just miss some of the best days in the market, if you miss like the 5 best days in the market or 10 best days in the market, your returns are like cut in half or cut by 2/3. So you have to be right twice. It's impossible. No one has done it consistently. Again, Warren Buffett, buy, hold. It's boring. It takes a long time, but it works. Doing this, you'll crush yourself.
In one of those reasons why they get cut so short is because often there's a big clustering that takes place where like the steepest drop-offs are also followed by the highest gains. It's like, was it on Friday where the market went back up 11%, but previously it had fallen like 33% or something like that. So if you had pulled out, then you would have locked in the losses at the bottom and then missed out on an 11% gain of it coming back a third of the way up. And so that's why timing is so difficult.
Also, and I think most people know this, but I know we have some ones and twos out there. When the market or when your investment drops in value by 50%, you don't need 50% to get back to even again. You actually need 100% rate of return to get back to even. That's how the math works. So if you have an investment that loses 50%, you need 100% rate of return to get back to even. And so you're right. That stat is correct that the best days are followed by the worst days. If you miss out on those best days, it's going to take you forever to get back to even again.
And it can just be a handful of days over the course of like a decade. It's like Pareto's principle. You miss out on 20% of those days and it could make up for 80% of that gap that you were showing. Is it 10 best days? Nailed it.
Yeah. So
wow.
This is a little outdated. I just searched real quick on my computer, but average rate of return over the last 20 years during this time period, 7.2%. That's right here. If you miss the best 10 days in the market, your return's cut in half. Miss best 20 days, you're down to just pretty much nothing. If you miss the best 30 days, this is over a 20-year time period here.
Jesus.
If you miss the best 30 days, you've got a negative rate of return. So, that's
do you have that kind of confidence that you can time the market to be in at those right 30 days over 20 years? Yeah.
Yeah. And you can see here, 6 of the 10 best days occurred within 2 weeks of 10 of the worst days. Like this stuff is just impossible. Look, trading the markets and trying to time it like that. It's fun. I get it. Like it's exciting. You can do that. Just do it with a very small percentage of your investable assets where if you miss out on the market, if you lose your money, it's not going to impact your financial plan. So, also kind of while we're here, and since I have it open, one of my favorite charts, a colleague or a friend, Michael Batnick, put this together and I just kind of prettied it up. But if we go back to March of 2009, these are all the things that have happened since then that might have caused you to panic and sell and blow out of your portfolio. Some of these things were huge deals, if you remember, like the US government shutdown there in 2013, people were losing their minds. And so, this is a little outdated, right? March 2017. But if you just would have stuck through
Ebola on there.
Yeah, exactly. Ebola. If you would have just stuck through this entire time period and just held your portfolio, you had a 257% gain in your portfolio. If I extend this chart, if I updated it, it would be even higher. If you panicked and sold through all this, not only would you realize taxes and there'd be expenses involved, but you would never see this type of gain. So
one of the things that you said that I really like that I've actually been doing recently since all of this stuff, and I think we'll have to go back to some of the basics of investing, but just to follow up on that, I opened up so I have my normal investments with Vanguard, but I opened up a Robinhood account and just put a tiny amount. I put $1,000 in it as just that sandbox, like you're saying, where it's like, hey, you want to feel like you're doing something. You want to feel like you're actively engaging and have something to pay attention to. And so it's like, you can do something like that with a very, very small portion of your money that you invest to give you that outlet, but it is not going to affect your long-term outcomes because like you're saying, you can't time the market. And if you want to give yourself a little play to do that, you can do that. But I think you gotta nail the basics first. And that's what I would like to kind of talk about now is, okay, let's say somebody has bought into all of this. They're not going to time the market. Slow and steady wins the race, consistently investing. How does somebody get started, and what should they be thinking about in terms of, because I imagine that's kind of where that investor policy statement comes in, like what is the timeline you're looking for, what is the lifestyle you want to lead, but how would they get started with investing?
Well, I guess the first thing you have to think about is this something that you want to navigate on your own? And if so, that's totally fine. Or do you want to lean on a professional? Don't lie to yourself. Like, don't kid yourself. A professional is always going to do a better job. I don't care what industry it is, but a professional is always going to do a better job. It could be mowing my lawn, right? Like, I could mow my own lawn, but I promise you, if I hire a professional person, a gardener, a landscaper, like, they will mow my lawn better than I will. They will be more efficient at it. So don't kid yourself. Like, you can do this stuff yourself. It's certainly not rocket science, but a professional will do a better job. And we can talk later if you need help finding a certain type of professional. I'm happy to provide some resources there. But yeah, there is also some power in doing this yourself and kind of learning the hard way a little bit. A lot of us learn by doing. And so getting started would be as simple as opening up an investment account, opening up an IRA or a Roth IRA, putting money into that account, making your first, purchase, and like going through that process and feeling it and going through it and asking questions and talking to the representative on the phone or the chat or whatever. Like, you can learn a lot just by going through that. This is, again, assuming that you have all these other things buttoned up and you're not just like aimlessly, throwing money around. But if you're like, okay, like, one of the pieces of my financial plan says I need to go max out my, traditional IRA this year. I'm going to go and do that. I'm going to go open up an account. I would use one of the major custodians out there, TD Ameritrade, Charles Schwab, or Fidelity. Or Vanguard, right? So one of those four. We want to keep costs low, and all four of those custodians do a good job of doing that. And then go through that actual process and put that plan into place. Again, if you need help, there are professionals out there that can help. But you can certainly do that on your own. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I'm happy to drill deeper.
What do you think about the robo advisors that are out there? Wealthfront, Betterment, what is it? What is the other one? M1 Finance. There's a handful now that have popped up, but what are your thoughts on those as a place to start?
I think they're great. I think it's a great place to start. They do a great job. I have a Betterment account just, as kind of an experiment to get, see what they're up to. I think they do a really good job. Maybe like one of my concerns is what happens to Betterment or Wealthfront in the long term. Their financials aren't super pretty. They've spent a lot of money. They've raised a lot of money. I always just worry, like, a good example would be LearnVest. So LearnVest was a super popular online platform for financial planning. And then what happened? They got bought out by Northwestern Mutual, like a company that I would never, ever, ever recommend somebody do business with. So this awesome platform, LearnVest, that the founder was actually interviewed on the How I Built This podcast, just a killer platform. And then they got swallowed up by Northwestern Mutual. I'm like, that's not what I would want as a consumer. United Capital, great firm, just awesome firm, doing all the right things. They sold. Guess who they sold to? Goldman Sachs. I don't want my money with Goldman Sachs. So that's like one of my personal concerns. Charles Schwab is not going anywhere. They're actually in the process of purchasing TD Ameritrade. Fidelity has been around forever. These are giant companies. So I think, perfect is the enemy of good here. Betterment makes it really, really easy to get started. You don't have to think about much. You can, in a few clicks, open this up and fund your account. The investments are low cost. Their fees are low cost. So you can't really go wrong. I'd prefer something more like Vanguard, Charles Schwab, or Fidelity, but yeah.
And is there, when you talk about those concerns about, say, a Wealthfront or a Betterment getting swallowed up, would your underlying holdings be affected, or it would just be more so now it's being managed and may start moving the company in a direction where they're increasing fees or things like that?
Yeah, it could be a whole change. I mean, right? Like, all these LearnVest clients are now being sold, expensive whole life insurance policies that they probably don't need. So it's an extreme example. Again, it's just more like a personal thing. But like in general, I think, Betterments and Wealthfronts of the world do a great job, and they're great at helping you save, invest, and accumulate wealth during your accumulation years. You get what you pay for, right? In anywhere, you're not going to get high touch service. You're not going to get financial planning help. You might get some basic financial planning help, but you're not going to get in-depth financial planning help. They're not going to help you learn how to save taxes and optimize all these things. It's just like they're going to help you invest at a very low cost, and that's it. Mm-hmm. So once your life starts to get more complicated and you've got a bunch of different moving parts, like an actual professional that has time to work with you one-on-one, you're going to get better service. That's just how the world works. You get what you pay for.
And so to go to the accounts that you would actually open. So I imagine the best places to start, and correct me if I'm wrong, would be if you're lucky enough to be at a company that has a 401k match, max out that 401k match. And you have the option of like a Roth IRA as well as a HSA, which is a health savings account, which you mentioned. Are those kind of the three places to start that you would focus on in terms of like what type of accounts you would be opening up?
Yeah. And I'm going to throw in the chat box. We wrote an article and I did a podcast episode that you probably listened to, the correct order of saving.
Yep.
So where to save money first. So I put the blog post in there, which also has a link to the podcast episode. But yeah, you're right. We want to take advantage of that employer match. If you have it, that's free money. Take advantage of that. And then you want to circle back to some of these other things. Your health savings account, again, that's the magical unicorn. So get money in there. If you have employee stock purchase plan, ESPP, you're buying stock at a discount, a great place to invest and put some money towards. But again, like just like overall blanket, we want to max out these, what I call tax advantaged accounts before you just go open an investment, like a taxable brokerage account. We want to max out those IRAs, those 401ks, those 403bs, whatever you have access to. Just max those things out. Take advantage of that tax break.
And I mean, a Roth IRA combined with an HSA, you can save or invest almost $10,000 a year with those two. I think the Roth is $5,500 and the HSA is $3,550, if I'm getting that right, somewhere around there.
Roth IRA, traditional IRA are $6,000 for those under 50. Yeah.
Okay, so over or just about $10,000 you could put in with just those two. So that's a good place to start for people, unless you have those other options, 401k match.
And one common misconception, if you do have access to a 401k or 403b or just a simple IRA, something through your company, one common misconception is that you can't also contribute to a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA, and that's not true. You can do both. You may not get a tax deduction when you put money into a traditional IRA, but you can still put money in. We call it a non-deductible contribution. And once that money is inside the IRA, even though you don't get a tax deduction up front, that money still grows tax deferred. And tax deferred growth is really, really impactful. You're not paying taxes on capital gains and dividends and interest earned every year. So that's just more money in that account that gets to compound. Mm-hmm. So you can fill up all these buckets. In that post that I shared, it talks about all those different methods and how to make that happen. But a lot of people think like, oh, I didn't know I can contribute to a traditional IRA. I thought I could only contribute to my 401k at work. That's not true.
Awesome. And I know people would be curious to get the thoughts on the COVID-19 current state of things. The last thing I want to touch on before we do that is if you could go over kind of the difference of tax deferred and Roth versus traditional, and how people should be thinking about that, or what those things actually mean, like the tax deferred growth, when do you get taxed and all that.
Sure. Well, the first thing I'll say is that the name of the game is to get as much money into a Roth as possible over your entire working career. So that's what we want to do. We want to get as much money into the Roth as possible. So with a Roth, you don't get a tax deduction. Well, I'll back up. With a Roth, you make money, right? Through your job, through your employer, whatever you do, you make money, you pay taxes on that money, and then you put it into the Roth. So that money's already been taxed. So you don't get a tax deduction when you put money into the Roth, but that Roth is going to grow without taxes over the next 10, 20, 30 years or whatever. And when you go to take that money out, you don't get taxed on it. You don't pay income taxes on it. It's already been taxed, but it's growing significantly and you don't pay taxes on it. Also in retirement, you aren't going to have to take what we call required minimum distributions. So it gives you just a ton of flexibility in retirement to have as much money in that Roth IRA as possible. One of the biggest pitfalls I see with clients that come on board with us is they have all of this money in traditional IRAs and traditional 401ks, which means they're going to have a giant tax bill in retirement. Like they could be in a higher tax rate in retirement than as a working professional making six figures. So the name of the game is to get as much money in a Roth as possible. A traditional 401k or a traditional IRA, you get the tax break up front, which is great, right? Everyone loves a tax break. The problem is, well, let me finish this first. You get a tax break up front, that money grows tax deferred. And when you take money out, that's when you have to pay taxes on it. So no taxes, and then you pay taxes later on. No taxes today, taxes later on. Everyone loves the tax break. Everyone says, I want to contribute to a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA because I get a tax break right now. The problem is that tax break, whatever that number is, you might a couple $1,000 that you're getting, that money disappears. Most people don't say, okay, I contributed to my 401k. That gave me a tax deduction of $3,000. I'm going to take that $3,000 and I'm going to go invest it for my future. No, they go and spend it. It just goes into their budget and it disappears. So that tax break doesn't actually become a part of their retirement plan or their financial plan. It just disappears. So I love the Roth because you're actually investing that money. You're paying taxes on it and investing that money.
One thing, and God, you just keep giving me so many threads to pull on. So why should somebody say you're 25, you're listening to this, you're thinking about getting into it, you're talking about retirement. Why am I thinking about something that's 40 years away?
Yeah, good question. Number one, it takes a long time to reap the rewards of this stuff, right? Like you just can't build wealth in the short term. Also, we want flexibility later on. You mentioned at the top of the show, our kind of slogan at our firm is to make work optional in retirement, because our clients, and myself included, we love what we do. We don't want to work for 30 years at the GE factory and then retire at 65. No, like my clients who are physicians or attorneys or whatever professional, like they want to keep working. They love what they do. It might be part-time, but by saving and investing over the next 30 or 40 years gives you that flexibility in the future to make work optional. Say, you know what? I know I can retire. I've saved money, but I don't really feel like it right now. I want to continue working. And so it just gives you that ultimate flexibility. I know it's hard. It's like this, it's so far away, but here's the key. Just start, just like do something simple. Just $50 a month, $100 a month, just start automating this stuff and commit to a small number and you'll see it start to compound, and that's going to motivate you. You don't have to go from 0 to 60 overnight here. The analogy I often use is if you're a couch potato and you've never worked out ever before, you're probably not going to go compete at the CrossFit Games tomorrow. Like you're probably going to go to the gym a couple days a week. You might start by walking on the treadmill for 20 minutes and then you start to ramp up from there. So same thing, like just open an account, Betterment, Wealthfront, Vanguard, Schwab, whatever, commit to $20 a month and just start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful point, is like the ultimate form of strategy is giving yourself more optionality as you move forward into the future. And this is the perfect way to do that. So if you want to work, you can, but you don't have to have your primary decision, reason being money. You can do the things that you want to do because you took care of your future self now. So that's great. Okay. COVID-19. What's going on in the markets? What should people be thinking about? What are the risks that we're facing, and how should people be framing this for themselves?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll start with the last question first. There are risks that are in the marketplace right now. We have record low interest rates. Fed just dropped interest rates again. So interest rates are low, which can be helpful in other places in life, low mortgage rates, cheap ways to borrow money. But in general, it is a risk. We have record low interest rates. We've got a presidential election cycle going on this year. And then this bull market that we've been in for the last 10, 12 years looks like it's coming to an end. We've officially entered a bear market. Not only that, is the fastest bear market we've ever seen from top to bottom. I mean, it just went like straight down. We've never seen anything like it. So there are certainly some headwinds and some risks that exist out there. Obviously, COVID-19 is something that we've never seen anything like this before, at least in our lifetime. It caught, like we were talking about before the show, it caught us off guard. It always catches us off guard. Like, hindsight's 2020, the financial crisis in 08, 09. Now it seems so simple how we could have avoided it. But when it happened, it caught us all off guard. So it is a really serious thing. The biggest difference with this is that it's not a financial or it didn't start as a financial or economic crisis. It's a health crisis. And so what I'm seeing right now is more people focused on their personal health and their safety and their families than worried about their portfolios and their retirement. So it's just like a different feeling out there than it was in 0809. The Fed or the government, the U.S. rolled out a massive stimulus package, a $2 trillion stimulus package that might help the markets here in the short term. I think it's they're just doing everything possible to help recover from all this. I still think it's kind of a short-term Band-Aid. I don't think things really, really recover truly and really move forward until, maybe mid-April, May, when we really have clarity on this whole thing. So I think, we're in for some choppy times until then. I don't know the future. I don't have a crystal ball, but I do think it, might be kind of a short-term Band-Aid here, and it's still going to take some time to get some clarity. Here's the thing though. You will not know. When you know that there's clarity, when you have clarity around COVID-19, the market will have known sooner than you. The market will respond and react quicker than you will be able to respond and react. So when it makes the front cover of the newspaper or CNBC or whatever, it's already too late. So don't try to time this thing, but it may be, a little bit longer. The last thing that I want to mention on all this is there's so much bad news out there. Turn on the TV, read a paper. Like there's just so much bad news. It's really hard. So one of the things I did on the podcast this week was talk about the positives that could come out of COVID-19. So I'll just go through them really quickly. You can listen to the episode if you want to hear all of them, but better science is going to come out of this, right? A bunch of smart people around the world are meeting other smart people around the world that they wouldn't have normally, that would have not normally happened if it wasn't for this event. All those smart people coming together, building friendships, combining their expertise is going to lead to better science in the long term for sure. An improvement in our pandemic defense. I'm not going to say we're doing a bad job or a good job. I'm not going to go there, but for sure, right now we're getting a real life test, and going forward, we're going to be better equipped to deal with something like this again, if it were to happen. And something will happen, and something worse is probably going to happen at some point, and we will be better equipped to handle that. And then lastly, look at what we're doing right now. Meeting virtually, I think online education is for sure going to change and improve. Hopefully that brings education costs down. So I think that's certainly an area that's going to benefit from all of this is virtual online education going forward.
I love that. And one that I'll add on that I've been thinking about a lot is basically the like this idea of forest fires, where you get a little bit of a fire at the right time and it burns off the dead wood and the stuff that is all of these inefficiencies that are going on. And like you mentioned with like higher education and things going online or people working remote, it's people, maybe companies realizing, hey, we don't have to pay $50,000 a month in office space overhead. Maybe we could reduce that. Maybe we can make things more efficient, and we can use this time as an opportunity to take advantage of that and go through our budgets, see what we're spending money on, either personally for yourselves, like you're mentioning, like what are you paying for? What are the subscriptions that you've been paying for a year that you didn't even realize, or a company? What are the things you can cut out? So I think this can also be used as a time to really optimize for efficiency and effectiveness that will only help going forward.
I love that. That's awesome.
But thank you for some concrete actions that people can take right now in terms of, like, we talked about investing, but what exactly should people be investing in? And I know you said you can never time the market. I fully agree. What is it? Time in the market is more important than timing the market. So getting in there and allowing that compound interest to take effect. But what should they be, investing in? What would you recommend? And obviously it's all different for everybody, but how could they come to their own conclusions on where to put that?
Yeah, I'll answer that last.
Okay.
The first two things that you should be doing, assuming everybody in one way, shape, or form has investments in the public markets, whether it's through your work or through an investment account of some sort. So the one thing that you can take action on that you have control over right now is to rebalance your accounts. When you rebalance your account, what you're doing is you're taking advantage of that old adage of buying low and selling high. When you rebalance your investment account, you're selling the things that have gone up and you're buying the things that have gone down, and you're kind of putting that puzzle back together again. So right now, markets are a mess. Your portfolio, if you own multiple positions, they've all probably gone in different directions here, right? So sell the things that have gone up, buy the things that have gone down, rebalance that portfolio. Extremely powerful. The second thing I'll mention before answering your question is this is a good opportunity to super fund your tax advantage account. So if you have the resources to max out your 401k for the year right now, do it. One thing I'll mention there is there's something called a true up provision. So if you do have a 401k through your work, make sure that there is a true up provision before you go dump all that money in there to make sure that you get your full employer match. If that true up provision doesn't exist, you could miss out on your employer match. But if it's an IRA, Roth IRA, or whatever, and you have the resources, maybe you max that thing out right now while the markets are down 20, 30%, take advantage of some low prices. It could go lower, I don't know, but prices have certainly come down. So you might super fund these accounts and just get that money in those tax advantage accounts now, and then let that compound and grow. And then kind of to your point, I want to invest. What do I invest in? Or I already have investments. What should I be doing? So for sure, review your investments right now. And I love what you just said about kind of getting rid of the things that we don't need. Find ways to optimize and improve these things so that when things do recover, and it will recover, it will happen, that you're just like primed for success and you can take part in as much of that recovery as possible. So number one is every single investment, I don't care what it is, has an underlying cost. We call that an expense ratio. So go and find out what the expense ratio is on these investments that you're investing in, and make sure it's low. It should be under, I'll just say under 0.5%. It should be under 0.2%, but let's just say under 0.5%. You might find investments in your account that are charging 1%, 1.5%, 2%. So cut those costs. You can go to morningstar.com, plug in the ticker symbol, and they'll show you the expense ratio. And then when it comes to like what to invest in, global diversification is huge. Most people, when I look at their portfolios, most of their money is invested in US stocks, but the world doesn't work that way. We are a global economy. So we need to own US stocks. And I'm a believer in owning all of the US stocks, not just 1 or 2 or 20, all of the US stocks, and then all of international stocks. And then you might include some bonds in there as well. So a very, very, very simple portfolio. This is perfect as the enemy of good here. This is not perfect. There are ways to optimize it, but it's called a Vanguard 3-fund portfolio. Vanguard Total US Stock Market Fund, Vanguard Total International Stock Market Fund, Vanguard Total Bond Market Fund. Those are 3 funds. Let's say you have an 80% stock, 20% bond investment policy statement. You put 40% in that US stock fund, 40% in that total international fund, 20% in that bond fund, and you're doing better than 99% of the investors that are out there. Schwab, Fidelity, Betterment, everything we talked about, they all have their own kind of version of those solutions, but that's like a simple, and you can Google Vanguard 3-fund portfolio. You can find more information on it. That's where I would start, if it were me.
Mm-hmm. And I believe the Bogleheads have a book on the 3-fund portfolio that you can pick up. This is the same portfolio model that I follow. I used to have a very complicated one. About 9 months ago, I switched over to something like that. If you do have a complicated one, I imagine this is a great time to adjust and move over to a much more simplified portfolio where you could potentially make some of those sales moving it over, where you're not pulling out of the market, you're just shifting it over, and then take on some of those realized losses that could then help potentially with taxes and things like that. So now seems like a good time you could take advantage of some of that to fix things and move them around, make it more efficient, like you're saying.
Yep. Awesome.
Okay, let's get into some Q&A, because we do have a good amount, unless you had any other key things that you wanted to go over.
I guess just a couple quick things. One, again, that simple 3-fund portfolio, perfect as the enemy of good. There are ways to improve and optimize it and make it even better. If you are in that camp and you do want to get better with your investments, there's a short book out there called The Investment Answer by Gordon Murray. It's a super easy read, but that will teach you how, based on academic studies, how you can improve and optimize that simple 3-fund portfolio and just get a little bit better. So
what is the name of that one more time?
It's called The Investment Answer by Gordon Murray.
Awesome.
You talked about, I think you mentioned it, but there are some great apps out there that will help you negotiate your bills and cut expenses, Trim and Bill Shark. a couple apps that you might consider if you're like, hey, I need to, burn some of these things and get these things out of my life, or cut some corners and save some money. Those are two apps to consider to reduce some expenses in your life. They'll negotiate cable bills for you. They'll search through your history and help you cut some costs there. We already talked about mint.com. I'll just give you one single blog out there if you want to learn and educate and kind of follow along. It's called abnormalreturns.com. Tadas Visconta is the owner of that blog. And what he does is every single day, he curates the best personal finance blog posts that are out there in the blogosphere into one place. So every single day, he's got a set of just awesome, blog posts to read. So I would just subscribe to Abnormal Returns or go to his website. So just a few resources for people to consider if they want to kind of continue learning from here.
Those are great. And Taylor, if you could send those to me afterwards, and I'll post those with the replay. Yes, there will be a replay, everybody. So if you missed anything, we'll get you taken care of. Okay, so the first question that I'm seeing, are there lessons from history that offer a rule of thumb for growth opportunities 5 to 10 years after any crisis? Example, any patterns that we can see?
There is some data. I'll see if I can find an article or kind of support this. More often than not, historically, when we have catastrophic events like this, going forward over the next 5 to 10 years, we see pretty awesome returns. So it is a cue that, again, it's like the Warren Buffett, buy when there's blood in the streets. We want to buy when everyone else is scared. Historically, most of the time when things are ugly like they are right now, investing right now leads to some pretty great returns over the next 5 to 10 years. There are a couple times in history where that has not happened. One of them is the Great Depression. Things got really ugly, and then they got even more ugly, and then they got even more ugly. So that could happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but that could happen. And so we can only do our best with the data that we have.
Okay, next one. Thinking ahead about where tech is going and the vulnerabilities that may exist in capital gains taxes, are there still benefits in putting money into stocks versus building our businesses and keeping healthy liquidity?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Very successful entrepreneurs will often reinvest back into their business or businesses versus putting money in the stock market. And it's not so much about taxes as it is about knowing that they can get, and this is a very small subset of people, but knowing that they can get a better, more predictable, stable rate of return by investing back into their business or businesses versus putting money in the stock market. And again, a very small subset of people. I'm one of those. I've reinvested a lot of my money back into my business and multiple businesses versus saving a bunch of money in traditional retirement accounts. There's an interesting study. I cannot find it, but I read it a few years ago. It came out of Harvard, that the path to wealth, it kind of compared two people. One person worked for a company, like your traditional W-2 employee, maxed out all their retirement accounts, created wealth over 30 years. The other person was an entrepreneur. They didn't save any money, but they built this business. They both end up in the same place, but they take a different journey to get there, and they take different levels of risk. So again, you can make this your own, but I would think more about, I guess, what's right for you. I wouldn't think so much about the tax element of it, mostly because we don't know where taxes are going. There could be tax law changes tomorrow for all we know. So I wouldn't make decisions based on that.
Yeah. And I think that goes to that third slide that you showed of like, what do you control, what's within your control and what's not. And if you have a business and it's healthy and you see that it can be sustaining and that reinvesting, you think there's some pretty, certain returns built in there. Obviously nothing's risk-free, but I think you'll probably sleep easier at night knowing that it's in something that you're controlling. But I imagine you can also kind of go ahead.
Yeah, just don't kid yourself. I think a lot of us business owners, we think we have a great business. We lie to ourselves and we keep putting money into it, and it's really not a great business. So, if that's the path you're going to go, like, you should have a CFO in charge here telling you, yes, you have a healthy business, and putting more money into it will make it healthier.
Yeah. And it can also be a part of a diversified portfolio where part of what you invest in is your business. But then if it is a startup that has tremendous risk, then maybe you're also investing in some very conservative things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of cash. I would hold a lot of cash. If you're investing in startups or you have a startup, like you should have a lot of cash on hand.
Yeah. Okay. Next one. And I think there's an assumption that's built into this question that hopefully you can address. If investing is a long-term game to benefit for compound interest, what are cues for us to know when we're betting on a bad horse?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, I don't believe in betting on a single horse or a handful of horses. The portfolios that we manage for our clients, if you like look under the hood, we own like 12,000 different securities across the globe. We own the global market. So we own everything, and we want to own everything at the lowest cost possible and as tax efficiently as possible. So to me, a bad investment, a bad horse would be something that's extremely concentrated or extremely expensive. So a really easy way to figure out a bad investment is to look under the hood and see how much you're paying for it. I'm not talking about what you're paying a financial professional. Just take that out of it. If you're not getting value from a financial professional, that's different. But like an actual investment, look under the hood and see what you're paying. You might be really surprised. No one has a crystal ball, but the best predictor of future returns is the underlying cost of an investment.
Awesome. Yeah.
And
I
guess to say that a little bit better, lower cost investments are going to do better over time than higher cost investments.
Yeah. My favorite phrase for that is that trying to find like the winning horse or the winning stock is like finding a needle in a haystack, and it would be better to just own the haystack.
I love it.
Yeah. All right. So another one, considering the 2% investor return plus even higher risks to losing money since companies are starting and failing faster than before, what is investment advice to give if you have 200,000 net in hand after feeding taxes, etc., upon retirement? Consider a 25-year-old could save, this is a long one. Consider a 25-year-old could save $5,000 per year for 20 years under his mattress and have $200,000 tax-free and risk-free upon retirement.
Here's the problem. The reason that we invest money, whether it's in businesses, in the stock market, the reason that we invest money is not to like try and get a high rate of return. The reason that we invest money in the public markets, private markets, is to keep pace with inflation. You put money under your mattress, you're losing money every single day. You put money in the bank, even if you put money at Ally Bank and earn 1%, 2%, whatever, you are losing money every single day to inflation. So $200,000 today is not $200,000 in the future. So the reason that the best hedge against inflation is stocks, right? Or, again, successful businesses in the private markets. But you have to invest your money if you want to keep pace with inflation, or unless you're just making a bunch of it and you're like stashing away millions and millions and millions of dollars and it doesn't matter at that point. That goes to my comment about risk capacity, which is how much risk do you need to take versus what you're comfortable. Risk tolerance always gets, makes the headlines, but risk capacity means how much risk do you need to take? And again, you might have $10 million, it might not matter, but yeah, that 25-year-old, you can't put money under the mattress. You will literally be broke in retirement.
Mm-hmm. That $200,000 will not go nearly as far when you're 65 than it does now. Yeah, they said that's a great insight. Thank you. That is the end of our questions. And I know this went a little longer than we were expecting, but this was an amazing conversation. I really appreciate you coming on and doing this for our audience. Do you have any final things you would like to leave people with? And again, check out Taylor's website, which is, where would you direct them? Definefinancial.com is your financial advisory firm. There's also Stay Wealthy. Is it staywealthy.com?
It's youstaywealthy.com. Somebody, I don't know who is squatting on staywealthy.com. So it's youstaywealthy.com. And that's really my educational platform. That's my way of just kind of giving back to the world and reaching a larger audience. So youstaywealthy.com will lead you to everything else, the podcast, the blog, all that stuff. So check it out. There are very easy ways to contact me and ask me questions. I respond to every message that I get. So please reach out. Don't be a stranger.
Awesome. Taylor, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was incredible. I think it's going to help a lot of people and really appreciate it. Everyone on here, thank you for joining us. Taylor, thank you once again. We'll be talking again soon, I'm sure.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everyone. Stay safe, be well, stay wealthy. All right. Take it easy. Bye-bye.